Welcome to Ruby Thursday. I'm Melissa Wanish. This is Ruby snack number 49, Scopes, using the merge method. In this episode, you'll learn how to test scopes and how to write a scope using the merge method. If you'd like to code along, you can clone the Ruby Thursday example app with this branch. Git clone Ruby snack 48, and that's a single branch. At that repository, you'll cd into the app, bundle, and Rails db create db migrate. So what is the merge method? It merges in the conditions from other if other is an active record relation. Returns an array representing the intersection of the resulting records with other if other is an array. This is used when you have an associated model and you're trying to gather records that have a certain condition related to that associated model. Of course, first we need our feature spec. We're going to view recent evaluations from the Starship page. So we're going to see all the crew members' recent evaluations. First, we need a Starship. And then because I need very specific crew members and crew member evaluations, I'm going to put the rest in a before block. We'll define crew member 1 as belonging to that Starship with the name Miles O'Brien. And then crew member 2 is his lovely wife, Keiko. Then the recent evaluation will be for crew member 1, while the old evaluation will be for crew member 2. I could have made 2 evaluations for the same crew member, but I thought it'd be good to have 2 different crew members. And then you see we set the start date as further back in the past. The factory for evaluation has it as date yesterday. Then the scenario, we visit the Starship page, and we expect to have the content recent evaluation start date. And we expect to have a link to view the evaluation that goes to that evaluation. And we expect the page not to have the content old evaluation start date. We want to make sure we're only seeing the recent ones. Jumping into our text editor, let's open up our spec folder. And then we're going to create our new file for this new feature spec. And of course, I will save it as view recent evaluations spec.rb. And then I'll paste in the spec. Now let's run it to make sure that it runs and has an error that we're expecting. So we're expecting that it'll say, oh, well, we don't have that date on the page because we haven't put it there yet. So it's running. So yes, indeed, it does not find the date, which would be yesterday. So our feature spec is running, but now we actually need to test our scopes that we're going to put in so we can gather those recent evaluations. We're going to add a few tests to our evaluation spec for our evaluation model. We're going to set a scope named by Starship, so it's going to return evaluations for that Starship and not for all the Starships. So to make sure we're only getting for one, I'll make 2 Starships, Starship 1 and then Starship 2. Then we'll make a crew member for the first Starship and we'll make a crew member for the second Starship. Then we'll make an evaluation for that first crew member. And then we'll make an evaluation for the second crew member. Then we'll set the results. If you haven't worked a lot with scopes, scopes can only be called on the class name. And that's it. That's why you need to feed in any kind of attributes if you only want it for a certain record. We're going to call it on the class name evaluation.byStarship, and we will feed in Starship 1. Now we expect those results to include the crew member 1 evaluation, and we expect the results not to include the crew member 2 evaluation. I have opened the model spec, and I'm going to put in that first test and save that. Now let's run it, make sure it's running correctly, and that we haven't made a mistake in writing our test in any way, forgetting an end or a comma. So we're running that, and it fails, and it says it doesn't have that method or that scope because we haven't written it yet. All right, now here's our scope where we're going to use merge. So the syntax for a scope is scope, and then colon, the name of the scope, and then comma. Don't forget that comma. And then it's setting a proc, and we're feeding in Starship. Then the query is joins crew member. So the evaluation belongs to just one crew member. Otherwise, if it was a has many association, that would be plural. But it's belongs to, so it joins crew member dot merge, and then the class crew member where that Starship ID matches the Starship ID that we're feeding in. Scopes have a nifty thing where if you don't enter an attribute, you can say, hey, if the Starship present, and then it won't completely kill your app and it won't have an error. So you see how you can use merge to qualify what you're trying to gather by another associated model. Opening up our evaluation model, let's include that scope and make it pretty and save. And now we'll run the spec again, and hopefully this time it will pass, and it does. We're going to add another scope, and this time it's for recent. We want just the recent evaluations. I will create a recent evaluation and an old evaluation, again with a date further back than 2 weeks. We'll set the results as evaluation.recent, and we expect the results to include the recent evaluation and expected not to include the old evaluation. Jumping back into our model spec, let's include that new test and save, and then we'll run it again. This is the process. We add a test, we run it again. So this time it should have one passing and one failing, and it does because we haven't written the recent scope yet. The recent scope is a bit simpler because we're only checking something specific with evaluation, not with crew member. So the recent scope is where the start date is greater than date today minus 1 week. Now don't forget, dates are a little tricky. You feel like, oh, it's recent, so it's like lower, but really you got to think about that date being greater than whatever time frame you want. We're going to just do recent evaluations, meaning a week or newer. Back in our model for evaluation, let's add that new scope, and then we will run our spec again. And this time we have 2 examples passing. Now that we have our scopes ready to go, let's put them to use. I'm going to set recent evaluations in our show method for the starships, and we'll call both of those scopes. You can chain scopes. So it'll be evaluation by starship, feed in that starship, .recent. So quickly just opening up our starship's controller and pasting in to find all the recent evaluations. Finally, we need to update our view. So we'll have a heading for recent evaluations, and then for each recent evaluation, we'll show the start date, and let's go ahead and have the crew member name. This could be cleaned up a little bit, but for the purposes of this episode, I left it breaking the law of demeanor, but you really would want to have a method on evaluation to show the crew member name. Then let's link to view that evaluation, which is the crew member evaluation path. We need to feed in the crew member and the evaluation, and that's it. Opening up our view for showing the starship, we'll just add that right up there at the top, right under the starship name, and save. Now we go back to our original feature spec and run it again, and now it passes. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you are not already on my mailing list, head on over to rubythursday.com to do so. If you are not already subscribed on YouTube, click that big red button to subscribe. You get the episodes just a little bit before everyone else. And if you'd like to leave a comment, leave it on YouTube. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.